Welcome to Module 2, Foundational Practices. Today we're going to focus on how to set up that counseling atmosphere that will provide a safe and secure environment for all students. So to begin with foundational practices, our first foundational practice is to make sure that you are doing your best to provide a positive school climate. Now, one part in that is to know what you can control and what you cannot control. However, as much as you're able to, being able to provide that positive school climate in order for your students to feel safe and secure, their academic achievement will go up, as well as their social skills and being able to interact effectively with others, including the adults in their life. So, establishing norms, establishing a collaboration with the faculty, with the staff, with the community, so that way your school can get the best resources, best support possible to provide that positive school climate. And to do this, you use school climate data. This module is going to be heavy on data and the importance of data. In addition to providing a positive school climate, we have to be culturally responsible. There are a lot of different cultures now today hitting our school system. You have the students that are struggling with gender identity and sexual orientation. You have students who are struggling with their ethnicity and race and being accepted for who they are. And so those are new, or maybe not new, but more discussed topics than what they used to be. And so you want to make sure that whatever program you put in place, that it models cultural support and advocacy. You want to make sure that whatever model you put in place supports your students who have low SES, socioeconomic status. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing, you're teaching and valuing the diversity. Now, this does not mean that you necessarily have to agree with the diversity. For example, you may think that transgender is against the Bible and against everything that is what we should follow as a society. However, there's a line where we have our beliefs, and yet at the same time, we are understanding that that is something that student has to wrestle with their relationship with God or their higher power. I say God or higher power because we have to recognize that our students that we work with are not all going to be Christians. They're not going to all believe the same that we do. And to be honest, those of you that are listening to this right now, you may say, I'm a Christian, and I would say I'm a Christian. And even if we sit down and discuss different topics, we might find that we come from a different viewpoint in how we interpret what the Bible is teaching us. So that leads into the next topic of social justice or biblical justice. This is a very fine line because we do want justice. We do want people to be respected and treated as they should. You know, I certainly would not want a family member of mine to be treated differently because maybe they were struggling in a certain area. I'll give you an example. My son currently has hair that's probably about as long as mine, about shoulder length, and has decided to go with earrings. He's a musician. It's kind of his thing, and, you know, I wouldn't be real happy if somebody was judging him because of that and not getting to know him as the person, because his hair and his earrings make up a very small part of who he is. It's the same thing with our students who are struggling with certain topics. Yes, that does make up a portion of them, but how much of that is, the holistic perspective? Um, Now, understanding where you stand on issues and then understanding how you're going to help your students through the issues that they're struggling with, even whenever it's different from where you stand. That's that balance between social justice and biblical justice. Do we beat them over the head with the Bible? I would say no. For one, you're working in a public school system, and so that's a quick way to get yourself fired. But understanding that balance and that friction that's just going to be there between being a Christian working in a public school system. You want to confront bullying and harassment. Yeah, bullying and harassment is worse than what it was whenever I was growing up. And I'm not going to tell you the years of that. But, there was passing notes, or there was kids talking about you behind your back. Now it's social media, and kids are brutal on social media. And so it's helping our students through that process. A lot of our students are struggling with anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation, mainly because sexual orientation, gender identity disorders, bullying, harassment, and that can work both ways, on maybe they're being bullied and harassed because they're not coming out of the closet with their friends, and to use an old phrase. Or maybe they're being bullied and harassed because they are a little bit different than their friends. And so helping our students get through that process, that's part of that culturally responsive. Cultural is covering a larger area than what it used to. And I think the gray areas can get difficult. So this is going to be one of those things that as a Christian, it's taking that time to, as a professor of mine said, one ear on God, one ear on your student, and you're listening for God to guide you through that session. Okay, so MTSS, this is a form of delivery. Most school districts use this form of delivery. What this approach does is it integrates programs and helps coordinate from several different aspects. So we talked about this last week. I'm not going to go belabor that point. But what you want to do is you want to look at what's going to be the best for your campus. You see the data in your campus. You know what your students need. For example, whenever I was in the school system, the school I was counseling at, it was a 7th and 8th grade campus in North Pasadena, otherwise referred to as Little Mexico. The students primarily were low SES. And so whenever I was building my program, I had to make sure that I integrated the appropriate pieces that would support a predominantly Hispanic population, would support students that may or may not have a whole lot, would support those students who maybe had to get themselves up and dressed and get their little brothers and sisters up and dressed because their parents were working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. Had to support those latchkey kids that may not have anybody to go home to. And so you're looking at all of the surroundings of your community and saying, okay, how do I best meet the needs of these students? It's not a one-size-fits-all. What I tell my students in counseling, professional, and identity is that many times we're going to find that we integrate more than I'm solution-focused or more than I'm this approach. We're going to really integrate those features because we have to really understand the people that we're working with in order to be successful. Your infrastructure is collaboration, collaborating with the right people. So, for example, if you are working in North Pasadena, then you might connect with some of the big plants that are down there to help support your students so that way they can get the computers that they need or the technology that they need because they have a learning disability, things of that nature. So there's a lot of collaboration, there's a lot of community support, and working with our communities. And then finally, selecting and implementing programs and practices. These are those programs and practices that you've done research, you've evaluated. So periodically, what I would suggest is, as you develop your program, you want to evaluate every 3-6 months, especially on a new program. I'd say closer to 3 months, to verify that you are actually meeting the needs of your community. So let's look at the tiers of support. The majority of our students are proactive classroom students. We can meet their needs in the classroom, and they are perfectly fine. Minor problems to no problems. Then you have anywhere between 10 to 25% that fit that tier 2 group. They need the small group. Maybe their boyfriend just broke up with them, or their girlfriend, and they're struggling. And you have a group that is about relational support and how to appropriately date at that age. Yeah, and typically that's going to be a junior high or high school level group, just so you know. Maybe you have a large number of students that are going to be first-year college students. Some of you guys may have been first-year college students for your family. And so nobody else in their family has gone to college. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to expect. And so you decide to put together a small group to discuss the options that are available to somebody who is wanting to go to college, and they're the first one to go to college in their family. And then finally, the smaller group, this is about less than 10% of your population, is going to be individual support. When we're doing individual support, we really want to be cautious on if our students are coming to us because they really need individual support, or if they are coming to us because they don't like math class and they want out of math. So you want to be hesitant about giving a blanket counselor's office pass. Those you want to save for the students that desperately need it. For example, some of the students, I had about 2 or 3 that they just were struggling. They didn't need to talk to me necessarily. They just needed a safe place to go and voice how they were feeling. And so they had arrangements that we made, me, the student, and their teachers, for them to come down to the office, whether I was there or not. And they had a notebook that they kept in my office, and they would get their notebook out. They knew where it was kept, and they would get it out. They would write. My clerk would usually let them in if I wasn't there. And they would just write however long they needed to, put their notebook back up, and go back to class. The rule of thumb I had with them was that I would not read their notebook unless they gave me permission to read it. To this day, I do not have a clue what any of those students said in their notebook. I honored that request. Now, did I sometimes want to go and check it out? Yes. But part of us providing that therapeutic relationship is honoring their requests when they're not around. Yes, you're going to have an urge to go check out what they're writing. You're going to have an urge to say, well, what if they're doing this? And I need to know so I can help them out. Trust me, if you have built that therapeutic relationship, they will eventually tell you what's in that notebook. And so there's a level of building a trust. A lot of our students don't have a whole lot of trust in adults. And that is primarily your tier 3 students. They're not going to have a whole lot of trust in adults. They are going to need you to help build that trust. Okay, so what does it look like for family, school collaboration, and caregiver education? Number 1 is understanding that family systems do not look like they used to. Back in the 50s, it was husband, wife, and I think it was 2.3 children. Now, how the point 3 got there, I could not even begin to tell you. Today's world, it's not that way. You have single parent homes. You have grandparent homes where the grandparents are raising the children, their grandchildren. You have same-sex homes where the adults are the same gender. You have co-parenters that live in the same home, but they're not together. So there's family systems that are completely different, or you might be able to identify with them quite well. I'll give you, again, an example using my son. He was raised in a single family home, but yet at the same time, his grandparents, my parents, were so involved, it was almost like having 3 parents to go to and report to. I think that was probably a little overwhelming for him looking back, but that just shows you the uniqueness of families in today's society. So you have to understand that in order to, again, meet your students' needs. Then training teachers, helping them understand that our students are not going to be academically where they need to be if those basic needs are not met. I provided you a video about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let me just warn you that video will start off with a black background to begin with, and then eventually the picture comes in. But even if your video glitches a bit and it takes a while for that to happen, still listen to the material. Because what we have to understand is if we don't meet students at their basic needs, they are not going to be able to achieve what we need them to achieve academically or even on the STAR test. So we want to train teachers to understand this and to understand uniqueness and how to help our students through their uniqueness. We want to get family members involved. Again, working in North Pasadena, where most of my parents were working 2 or 3 jobs, it was difficult and interesting getting families involved, but yet we still managed to do that as a campus. And we usually had great turnouts for meet the teacher night or concerts or what have you. So we want to get the family involved. We also want to do maybe some training for the parents. If we're working with parents who are young parents, they had their children when they were, in their teens. Well, I don't know about you and when you had your kids, if you have kids, but I know for me, at 25 years of age, it was a little overwhelming, and I had support. Some of our teen parents don't have that support, and it's incredibly overwhelming. So we want to help train our parents and guide them in the best approaches so that their students can excel beyond the parents. And that should be our entire goal. We should want to see our students, the next generation, excel beyond us. And that tells us that we're doing a good job. We want to look at barriers. We also want to find facilitators who can assist. But barriers are going to be a key issue that you're going to have to evaluate. For example, finances. It's always a barrier. Name your program. Name your activity. I want to go with some friends to London, and after we looked at prices, it's going to be between $2,500 to $3,000 on the cheap side. And so we all agreed, okay, the barrier is that's going to have to wait. So, that's a personal look at barriers, but being able to realize that finances can be a barrier. Being able to realize that if you don't have your administrator support, your principal support, that can be a barrier. So you want to make sure that you bring in your administrator. You want to make sure that you get your teachers to understand where you're coming from. Because when you have an adversarial relationship with your faculty, staff, or administration, it's going to provide a barrier for what you can do. But when you come together and y'all collaborate, and it's not I, but it's a team effort, then those barriers seem to dissipate, including the financial ones. Sometimes things can be worked out, or people will know somebody who can assist, that may not have come up had you had an adversarial type relationship with an administrator or a faculty member. You want to make sure that you hold school and family consultations. Connect with your parents. Yes, sometimes parents can be a little overbearing. Sometimes we may feel like we're counseling them more than we do our students. But when you connect with the parents, you're making a lifelong collaboration that's going to help support that student, which means that student now knows that they've got support. And then you want to recognize the cultural diversity of families, which we've already discussed. So I won't belabor that. So here's a chart that tells us parent participation in school-related activities. We have 92%, and this was based in 2019, so right before COVID hit. 92% attended a school or parent group meeting. 60% participated in school fundraising. 83% participated in a school or class event. And 47% volunteered. Now, post-COVID, those numbers may look a little bit different when they start looking at the data. That might have gone down. A lot of interaction outside of our homes and outside of Zoom or Teams or name your meeting platform. It's gone down post-COVID. And so I'm interested to see how those numbers change post-COVID or how they looked during COVID. But even if your parents can't be on site for these things, they can still collaborate in other ways. Be creative on how to get your families involved. Think outside the box on this one, especially if you work in an area where you have, it may be a 2-parent household, but both parents work. Or it may be a single parent household and they have to work 2 or 3 jobs. So get creative on your approaches. Again, we were talking about family uniqueness. This is just a chart to show the family uniqueness between millennials, Gen X, boomers, and the silent group, which is 1968. That's kind of I'm glad I'm considered not a silent one. So students were living alone, 3%. 8% were the boomers were living alone. A spouse with no child was 17%. A spouse and child were 70% for silent, is what I'm looking at. So if you look at this, you can see how the graph has changed, over the time and the way each family group is divvied out. So let's look at millennials, because those are the most recent groups that have been polled. 9% lived alone. 13% lived with a spouse but had no children. 30% had a spouse and child. So look at the difference there. And then between spouse and child versus child and no spouse. So you have 30% of the millennials having a spouse and child. And then 12% having a child, no spouse. It's an interesting display of numbers. You may have thought that it was going to look something different. You have 14% of millennials that report having another family type living arrangement. So that could be something very similar to what my son grew up with. So when we're looking at these stats, Again, this is on the U.S. level. This is not your campus level. But you want to look at your campus level. You want to understand, who are my students at risk? Why are they at risk? Are there enough of them at risk that we need to develop some kind of small group for those students that have XYZ problem? So data can be boring, but it can also be very beneficial to your program. I highly recommend using your data to drive your program. That's how you're going to have a successful program. And then you want to monitor. You want to monitor, how does technology affect my program? Do I need to have a web page as a school counselor? That's my own blogging page. I will tell you, if I was a school counselor in today's society, I would develop my own little page off of the school page, and I would just blog different things that I see that are happening in technology and social media, in working with parents. A lot of our students have a hard time connecting with their parents. So how do I help them connect? So when you're looking at how you're going to monitor your program, again, think outside of the box. And when you think outside of the box, you're going to be more successful. And finally, I want you to see this for your knowledge. Smartphone ownership. 42% of students had a smartphone in 5th grade. 63% in 6th grade, 85% in 7th, and 93% in 8th grade. So you're going to be working with students with a smartphone. You probably have children, if you have children, that have smartphones. And so that brings in a different grouping of how do I connect, knowing that my student is probably going to keep their nose in the phone more than pay attention. And a lot of classroom teachers have adjusted to this. And if you're thinking about how I handle this in the classroom, take that, transfer it into how do I handle this as a school counselor. If I have a group of students that are addicted to their phones, okay, how do I help those students be able to do their best and put their phones to the side long enough to get their work done? This week you're doing you're doing your reading notes. You're also going to continue working on your project and also working on that interview. So if you look at your syllabus, you'll see every week you're going to be posting some kind of discussion board or case notes. And every week you're going to be working on your projects so that you're successful. If you stay up with it on the weekly basis, you will be successful in this class. If you have any questions, as always, you are more than welcome to shoot me an email, and I will be more than happy to help. Y'all have a blessed week.